build towards a shared path forward for W&M Athletics. Tonight, we're going to engage questions from the community that have been submitted by members of our community. Tonight, we're going to pivot towards a broader focus on equity and budget stability as we build towards that shared path. I'd like to welcome some panelists who are going to participate this evening. Amy Sebring is the university's Chief Operating Officer. Chelsea Burke is Deputy Director of Athletics. And Mark Aleem is the President of the Tribe Club. And I would just offer a quick word of thanks for the collaboration with the Tribe Club as well as the W&M Foundation in recent weeks as we reviewed information and data that had been shared. So thank you to Mark. And Mark, if you want to moderate, we welcome your leadership, sir.
Excellent. And thank you, Chelsea and Amy, for being here. And I also want to thank all of you who have invested the time to join us. We're grateful for the many questions that have been submitted by the community. We'll get through as many as we can and also bring in questions submitted during this discussion. You could do so by using the Submit Questions link on tribeathletics.com/pathforward. Again, tribeathletics.com/pathforward. We will conclude the program at 8:30. The focus tonight will be on questions related to equity and finances. There's 4 major topics. 1, reinstatement of women's gymnastics, swimming, and volleyball teams, all on the women's side. Number 2, equity, Title IX considerations. 3, W&M athletic finances. And 4, endowment and fundraising. So we'll start with Monday's announcement. And Jeremy, I'll start with these questions for you. And I'm going to read several because they're questions all centered around Monday's announcement. And one is the elimination of the 7 sports programs was couched partly in terms of achieving Title IX compliance. How can the elimination of women's programs and their subsequent reinstatement both achieve Title IX compliance? Did the elimination put the college in further non-compliance? And if so, why were they identified for elimination in the first place? Also, in light of the college's reinstatement of the women's teams for Title IX purposes, a question came in wondering how we could have been in compliance last year or how we plan to be in compliance this year before the cuts were announced. So what led to the decision to reinstate the 3 women's sports that were slated for discontinuation per the September 3rd announcement? Jeremy.
Thanks, Mark. And I'm only going to do this at the beginning, but I'm going to share a few slides to help us walk through this one. And again, I just start by reminding folks that we are thinking of this problem in 3 frames. And we recognize that equity, budget stability, and excellence are required as we define W&M athletics and define that path forward for the future. And we also know the status quo is not, the status quo cannot continue. So one of the things that we learned this week and upon further review of information is that we needed to go further and faster in regard to equity. And so we moved decisively to do that. But we also know that budget stability remains an issue, and even beyond that, arriving at more of a shared definition of excellence in athletics for the entire community. But if you think about specifically the gender equity aspect, in college athletics, Title IX requires gender equity in athletics participation and other factors, including scholarships, benefits, and those sorts of things. And as many people have discussed, there are 3 prongs with which you might comply. So one of the 3. The first is substantial proportionality. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The second is a responsive history and continuing practice of adding programs for the underrepresented sex. And as we'll see at W&M, that's women in our athletics program. And the third is a demonstrated accommodation of the interests of the underrepresented sex. And I would simply note that my understanding of both prongs 2 and 3 is that they're temporary compliance measures. So for instance, prong 3, one way that's common that you might try to establish compliance is by a surveying effort that's intensive in trying to reach the entire student body to make sure that you're meeting an accommodating interest. However, the moment that you discover that you're not meeting those interests, you're no longer in compliance. So that's a temporary way to comply. A responsive history and continuing practice, the more that you continue to add opportunities for the underrepresented sex, eventually you do reach substantial proportionality if you continue that practice long enough. So again, that's a temporary state. building towards prong one. And so prong one is the standard which we hope to actually achieve in complying. And I'd simply share what our current state is. And again, based on pending litigation, we realized we had further and faster to go. But for our 2020-21 rosters for 23 sports, William & Mary would need to add 210 additional women's participants to reach proportionality in light of current OCR guidance, Office of Civil Rights guidance. And basically what you can see there is based on our enrollment and based on our participants, they're almost the inverse. And so there's a substantial move that needs to happen for us to achieve equity. And again, when we realized that the original actions proposed did not go far enough and fast enough, we acted decisively to make sure that we were moving in that direction. And so here's what that starts to look like. And I just want everyone to know we will share fuller data next week. I'm currently reviewing with our coaching staff every team's roster to make sure that we have a clear picture of what 21-22 looks like. And we'll bring that back to the community. But I want to make sure that we have it right when we bring it back to the community, that we've double and triple checked those numbers. And so with the reinstatement of the women's programs, essentially we will find ourselves essentially at substantial proportionality. So again, that's with the reinstatement of the women's programs, but continuing with the anticipated men's suspensions, as well as some appropriate roster management. And what I mean by appropriate roster management is no roster maximums or requirements, but that we're working with coaches in women's sports for what their ideal roster is, for what their desired roster for their competition is in that particular sport. And so within that, we know that in order to add men's participation from that equitable base, 20 additional men's participants would require an additional 29 women's participants, and 35 additional men's participants would require 50 additional women's participants. And so those are not inconsequential numbers. And it's one of the reasons I'm trying to be forthright in just saying there is no easy path at this moment to think about adding men's participation in the coming year.
Okay, thank you. But Title IX issues are not new to William & Mary. So why were they not fully addressed in the original plan?
Again, I've been in the job 2 weeks. And so what I'm trying to do is to move forward from the information I have. And so I would simply note that when we took a more in-depth view with legal scrutiny and counsel, we realized we had further to go, and we've taken actions decisively to make sure that we cover that ground as swiftly as possible. We are committed to building from a foundation of equity, and that's certainly what we plan to do and how we plan to proceed.
Okay. One of the questions from the audience was, when was the last time the athletic departments was in compliance with Title IX?
That again would depend on how you define compliance or how you sought compliance. So in theory, we would have previously been meeting demonstrated need, but we know now based on current actions that we need to move into substantial proportionality. And I would just say proportionality is the ideal way to comply. It certainly demonstrates that your student athletes are aligned with your student body in terms of participation rates. And we also know that the other prongs again are not quite as secure in demonstrating that you are compliant. And so we recognize that the status quo is not okay, and we're going to move towards a stronger foundation of equity in the coming year.
So as we look forward, what happens next?
So I'm currently engaging, as I mentioned, all the coaches. We've got to know with precision what their anticipated rosters are next year. And I expect to come back to the fuller community and say, here's what the data shows for how we're going to get to proportionality next year. And want to make sure that we've got that right. We're continuing conversations with alumni groups to see if there are viable paths forward, and recognizing that the timetables for those paths forward may involve some period of suspension, but recognizing that on a longer time frame, the desire to see additional men's participation at William & Mary could be possible in the future. But again, upon building from an equitable foundation.
Okay. And again, I appreciate you mentioning the engagement with the with the alumni groups, particularly the impacted sports. And I think that's something to, really what does this mean for the four men's impacted sports, the indoor, outdoor track, the men's swimming and men's gymnastics?
Yeah, I think, and again, the one thing I hope to reiterate every time engaging with student athletes is they have done everything expected of them to be a William & Mary student athlete. And when you talk about these particular sports, when you think about gymnasts and swimmers and track athletes, there have been a lot of early mornings. There's been a lot of toiling and anonymity, a lot of support from family and friends along the way as they were making early morning practices, or attending meets that were far off and things like that. And so the first thing I want to convey is that none of them have done anything wrong. And so as we look to build towards an equitable foundation, sincerely hope to convey the respect that these individuals deserve. We're going to continue to look within the 21-22 numbers to see what might be a viable path forward, a long-term path forward for men's participation. But even as we recognize that the opportunity for that is no longer as easy as we thought it might have been previously. We've engaged some things as a department. So there's a weekly meeting of staff that's intentionally designed to just focus on how we might support these student athletes and make sure that we're engaged with them in this time. All of our student athletes need support and care right now. The volume and magnitude of challenges that young people face is unparalleled in our history. But we're giving particular focus to the student athletes that we know are affected from these particular sports. And simply want to reiterate to make sure that folks know we do intend to care for these student athletes in 2021 and beyond. All scholarships are going to be honored, and we recognize that many are not scholarship student athletes, and they are fully William & Mary students, and we hope they continue at the institution. We also are going to support anyone that wishes to transfer to find other competitive opportunities to continue their athletic careers. And by way of note on that, the NCAA Council did vote, it's for full membership to vote, but the NCAA Council did put forward that no student athlete will lose a season of eligibility in the fall or winter seasons this year, which means that anyone transferring can do so without losing a year of eligibility. And finally, we intend to support any staff members that are affected. We've given them as long a period as possible and continue to support them as they plan for what may ultimately be career transitions. So in addition to all those things, we obviously hope to compete in 2021 as long as it's safe to do so, and are undertaking steps to be able to do that. But those are the immediate next steps and the things in place for our student athletes.
Well, thank you. I've talking to some parents whose children were impacted, and I know how much it really is devastating, quite candidly. And I just got a text of a question that came in, and it's from a concerned alumni parent. It says, what are you doing to address the overall morale issues in the athletic department, the difficult retaining staff, the need to unify all teams, the need to rebuild trust within the department and between the department and student athletes and concerned community?
I think that's a great question, and it's certainly a challenge in the moment. And one of the initial focuses, the moment my first day ended by meeting with Student Athlete Advisory Council members, and so I'm trying to be as present as possible, as supportive as possible. But when you find yourselves in moments in moments of crisis, and I don't use that word lightly, but I recall how we were planning for William & Mary as an institution to reopen this spring. And essentially, we started by focusing on what the core functions that we needed to deliver were. And so when you think about that as an institution, about what that means, what those core functions are for serving our entire student body and the folks who teach and work here, it's the same in athletics. We've got to build by providing an experience every day that allows them to train and hopefully ultimately compete, that allows us to support that practice and training, including with sports medicine and training staff. And as well as the academic support things that go into that. So from every day that we walk in, my request, and it's what the coaches are already focused on as well as the staff, is that we do everything we can to maintain a focus on serving, caring for, and leading our student athletes because they certainly deserve that. But it is a moment in which we are trying to find stable ground on which we can move forward together.
Thank you. Um, I think it's important to get a greater understanding of the equity diversity Title 9 items. So Chelsea and Amy, we will get to you with some of the financial items, but this we're going to stick with Jeremy here, because a couple questions that have come in is, if the general student population is nearly 60% women, does that mean 60% of the student athletes must be women? And a follow-up, what additional actions is William & Mary considering, particularly given the women's sports are now off the table, being reinstated? Will you commit to current male student athletes and their families, maybe outside of football and basketball, that William & Mary will not eliminate additional sports beyond the current male sports that have been cut during or after the current shared path forward process? And if the answer to this question is no, will you commit to notifying students and their families of such new cuts prior to the end of the calendar year, December 31st of this year? And then also, do you anticipate a reduction in support for men's scholarships? You got to remember all this, Jeremy.
I was going to say, Mark, laying it on me here.
Yeah.
So let me go back. The first one I think we addressed earlier in terms of what proportionality means. So yes, yes, for proportionality, you need your student athlete composition to mirror what the composition of your overall undergraduate student body is. And as to the second question, I simply want to note the second question in regard to sports. There's real concern. It's one of the reasons that we need to be decisive in moving forward and understand that it's. While I am particularly focused on making sure that we're serving the affected sports in this time, this is a moment where everyone is seeking stability in the department, and that there's real concern. And so I just want to honor that. I do not anticipate at this time, I do not anticipate that any other moves around program reductions will occur. And so that's what I can say at the moment. I also think it's important that, in regard to the notion of scholarships, we're working to define where our scholarship budgets for next year are going to be. But the intent is certainly that we would, well, not the intent, we will honor the current scholarships that are there, and have said that we're going to do that. And so what we're working primarily with is for coaches who are thinking about what scholarship budgets will be in FY22 and beyond. But Mark, I do think those questions reflect that this is a moment in which people are looking for solid ground and trying to just find their footing so that we can move forward. And at the same time, we recognize that part of an equitable foundation is going to be rebalancing how we award scholarships in terms of also as to how we're proportioning our participation. So we're trying to build emphasis on adding scholarship opportunities for women, on growing the pie that we have, and we're quite confident that the alumni and alumni of William & Mary, as they always have been, are ready to support the additional needs as we try to boost scholarships for women at William & Mary.
Okay, and I guess as a follow-up, we've heard about the specific financial challenges, and you've touched on this, but what are the specific Title IX parity issues? So, if we're almost flipped in terms of the participation rate relative to the student body, but where is it in terms of financial numbers specifically?
I'm gonna ask Chelsea to cover that one. Chelsea, you guys, I know we're posting a video with you and Amy tonight, but you'll cover that, I assume.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really excited about the video that Amy and I had a chance to shoot earlier this week. I think that's going to answer actually a lot of questions. And as Jeremy has said, we're really looking forward to sharing a lot of this information with everybody. But as stated, we're almost at right now at kind of the exact opposite of what our enrollment is in terms of the Title IX numbers and our participation. From a financial standpoint, we, and I've said this a lot of times, we make sure that we're giving everything to our teams that they need. Always not necessarily what everybody wants, but definitely what everybody needs in order to compete and have the schedules that they need to have. Obviously, we've got some requirements. We've got to visit schools like Northeastern and College of Charleston. They're pretty far apart. And William & Mary is fortunate in the fact that we kind of sit in the middle. of our conference. And so making sure that everybody has what they need to travel to those locations, to compete within that conference, and to have the things that they need to compete. But we are constantly reviewing and looking every year at what our budgets are, and very cognizant of kind of the situation that we're in terms of fundraising and revenue generation, and what we're able to do at William & Mary, and take that into consideration when we're planning those budget numbers for our teams.
All right, thank you, Chelsea. We did have a couple questions that can't come in. One from Bill Louv. Did the lawsuit by the swimmers cause William & Mary to fundamentally change its view on Title IX compliance?
I'll take that one, and welcome, Bill. I'm glad we had the chance to talk this week, and appreciate that you're watching. So, yeah, I appreciate that question from Bill. Equity has always been part of what we're trying to do, and so from the first moment, that we talked about this, or that I talked about this with the community, I said, here are three frames that have always been part of what we're doing, and equity was always one of them. What we discovered when we took a deeper look with in-depth legal review is to say that we aren't moving far enough, fast enough. I know I've said that before, but that's what we discovered. It didn't change our view. We've always wanted to establish a foundation of equity for the athletics department, and we saw we had further to go, and we decided to move quickly and decisively in that direction.
Okay, great. And as a follow-up, can you help us understand why William & Mary got Title IX compliance so wrong, especially in the context of the sport, the cut sports?
Yeah, so what I understand is that there is risk incurred when you're looking at hypothetical growth in roster numbers, and so the need to not think about what growth might look like, but where we are currently was one of the factors. But in engaging that review, my intent was to say, hey, there are fresh eyes on this situation. Are we there? And we felt like we needed to go further, and so we did.
Okay, excellent. All right, Amy, we'll shift a little bit towards you. And question that has come in is, what are the baseline factors that people should know about William & Mary Athletics finances to gain a better shared understanding about the issues at hand? Amy, can you hear me?
Amy, did you freeze? Oh no, Amy.
Oh my.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
This is what a live forum will do, but we have no problems because we know Amy is going to be right back. So yep. Let me go to one of the other questions, and then we can circle back to Amy. So Jeremy, I'll pick back on you. Please explain how the 7 sports were chosen for elimination, and support this decision with financial data that compares it to all sports in the program.
Yeah, I would go again. I know one of the questions people really want to ask is, to the decimal point, what was this individual factor? And so again, I just want to frame in determining what William & Mary sports sponsorship looks like going forward. We are looking for a comprehensive solution to a number of factors. And again, I would simply say, whenever you're looking at a comprehensive solution, the tendency, particularly if it's in an area that you care passionately about, is to say, I want to pull this piece out, and I want to focus on this one aspect of this piece. And so let me simply acknowledge that every one of William & Mary's programs has strengths and weaknesses as you would evaluate it for continuation. But here are some of the factors that would go into a decision like this. One is achieving gender equity. And we laid that out as the first frame. It's the most concrete frame. So achieving gender equity, which has clear parameters which we need to achieve. The second is the ability to strengthen community, and both the community within that specific sport itself. And I would simply note, there are incredible communities in every single one of William & Mary sports programs. And the more you're around our student athletes or hear from the alumni who built these programs and have contributed to them over the years, as well as the families and friends that support them. Incredible community there, but also thinking about the broader community. So how can the broader community engage our alumni and friends and neighborhood community, area community, regional community by attending events and games? Then you also look at operating costs and the ability to self-generate revenues. And again, a primary consideration is of sports' ability to bolster William & Mary's inclusive community by affording opportunity to people from a range of backgrounds that makes us all better for their presence here. And then then you would consider as well alumni and donor support on a relative basis. So one way you might look at that is alumni and donor support per student athlete. And I'd simply note that we've shared most of this data already, but ultimately I just want to come back to the notion of every program in one of those metrics has strengths and it has others in which it's weak or weaker. And so ultimately you're evaluating and recognizing that yes, there are metrics that any program can point to and say we are exceptional in this regard. And it's absolutely true. And so ultimately, when you make a decision like this, you do come down to just simply trying to respect the individuals who have given so much to the programs.
Thank you. And, just for purposes of clarification, because I've gotten a couple other texts and I should have known, even though the question came to me that the lawsuit was just from swimming. I want to clarify, it was not just the women's swimming, it was also women's volleyball and women's gymnastics. So thank you for making sure we got clarity on that. And then let me assure you as well that by no means was Amy frozen because of stage fright. That is not possible whatever. I've seen her speak. She is calm as a cucumber. So
from my vantage point, Jeremy was frozen.
yeah, there you go.
I was talking just fine. It was Jeremy that was frozen. I am so sorry. I am not sure what happened.
All right. So Amy, what are the baseline factors that people should know about William & Mary Athletics finances to gain a better shared understanding about the issues at hand?
Yep, let's try again, and I will keep all fingers off the keyboard. So athletics, it's important to understand athletics is one of our auxiliary enterprise programs for the institution. And so it's an auxiliary enterprise and that it is ancillary to our teaching and research mission, but provides a supportive, plays a supportive role at the university. There are a number of auxiliary enterprise activities at the institution: university housing, dining, the bookstore, student health and wellness, and athletics is classified among that group. The reason that it's considered to be an auxiliary enterprise is that it is expected to be revenue generating. And in particular, in Virginia, there are specific expectations that athletics in particular has to be self-supporting, meaning it can't draw from either revenues or other resources on the educational side, and it actually can't draw from any other revenues with any other auxiliary programs. So it has to be a tub on its own bottom and really manage within the resources that it's able to generate. The Commonwealth set out that expectation, and that's not every public institution or every state has that requirement, but the Commonwealth set out that expectation as far back as the early 1990s. But more recently, in the 2015 General Assembly session, they actually went even one step farther and said that among the areas of revenue that support athletics, one of the major areas of support comes from student fees, and that student fees can't be increased, or to the extent student fees are increased to support athletics, that has to be matched by a corresponding percentage increase in other operating revenues. And so, the two takeaways, I think, in thinking through the structure of the athletics budget is: one, overall, it has to be in balance. It can't draw from other places of the university to support its operations. And then within those funds that are designated for athletics, there are restrictions on how much institutional support in the form of student fees the university can raise, and an expectation that if we are raising institutional support, there are increases occurring in the other revenue streams as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for that comprehensive answer there, Amy. Really appreciate it. And just to dovetail on that, I would say that's part of why the Tribe Club exists. And for anybody who has contributed to Tribe Club, thank you, because the way the athletic budget has to be balanced, so to speak, at the end of each year is with contributions that have come in from the Tribe Club. They can't tap into, as Amy alluded to, other elements of the university. So if some years donations are good and expenses aren't so high, those Tribe Club reserves can bolster and be there potentially rainy days. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I think that's very helpful in framing that. Jeremy, back to you with both the Title IX conclusion and the every stone turned over conclusion proven inaccurate. Why are the financial conclusions not also being investigated as inaccurate?
Well, again, in moving forward in a phased way, we know we have to address the equity concern immediately, and so we moved on that. And in terms of financial concerns, one of the things I would just note for this group, and this began today, but anytime, or not anytime, but frequently at William & Mary as a best practice, whenever there's turnover in a senior leadership position, there's an audit of the department, and so we've begun that process, and are looking forward to welcoming the internal auditor and his team. Just so people are clear, the internal auditor is independent, reports directly to the board of visitors. And simply want to note that we welcome that. So I would just note that if there are areas that we can do better, we certainly want to. But I don't think, given the amount of the APA, the state audits William & Mary's athletic financials from the state auditor of public accounts, there are independent audits by the philanthropic organizations that support us. I think I feel like we should be confident. We should be confident that we're correct in the financial assumptions. And again, I would just note, when you're looking at a comprehensive solution, again, I know it's tough when you want to find one specific thing and say this is so right for us. All of these programs have strengths, and I would just note that where we sit now versus originally, there's a larger financial there's a larger need for financial sustainability, and for improving our financial situation that's going to come out of the decisions that we've made to advance equity. But we've been committed to that foundation of equity, and now we're going to move forward and seek financial stability. And as Mark mentioned, William & Mary is an exceptional place where the people who care about it, our alumni and friends, really pay forward the ability for our current students to have the experiences that they do. And so that's how we've got to move forward, is from a place of equity and now looking to build financial stability.
We had, Jeremy, two questions come in earlier today, pretty much in the same vein. And the first is, please tell us how each of the three sports reinstated earlier this week satisfied the financial stability criterion that interim Jeremy Martin, had announced. And another one asked, please identify the source of funding for the three sports reinstated on Monday, October 19th.
Yeah, we welcome these programs back. And so we look forward to seeing them thrive. And I think one of the things this moment has done is really created an impetus for us to have new conversations about what it means to support a program. But so we welcome these programs back and look forward to seeing them thrive. These decisions that advanced equity in a way that we were intentional about doing, they also create additional financial challenges, and so we've got to move forward with these programs, and we've got to move forward with the entirety of our programs and talk about how we're going to support all of them. But it's fair to say, if you look at the financials, that yes, we did bring back some programs that we're going to look forward to bolster and support with the alumni and friends of those programs to make them more sustainable financially.
This question I'll pose to both Chelsea and Jeremy, and it came in and it says, will you commit to disclosing all information considered by the administration regarding its consideration of the financial sustainability of intercollegiate athletics, including all financial data relating to revenues and direct and indirect costs and expenses, including the costs of athletic scholarships, so that when William & Mary community has the same information available to you as you do?
Yeah, we are a community of problem solvers, and so I want to acknowledge and respect that, and sincerely do. I also want to note, I am unaware, within the 26 institutions that have made similar decisions to William & Mary, I am unaware of examples of others who have been more transparent. And in saying that, I don't offer it as I don't mean it as a challenge, but if there's a model out there of an institution that's made a decision like that and has been more transparent with its data than William & Mary, would you please share it with me so that we can look at that model and learn from it as we go forward? But we've been trying to make information publicly available and recognize that there's keen interest in this. And so, again, I don't mean that as a challenge, but simply would say, I think we are trying to be transparent here, and certainly believe that to be the case. I mean, we're having forums tonight to answer questions in order to be more open and transparent, as well as the things we posted. So, yeah, I guess just a little bit different take on that question, Mark. Chelsea, I'm sorry, I've gone first. Is there anything to add?
Yes, and I would just continue to share that our plan is to continue to populate that website. So it's on tribeathletics.com, and it's where we're posting a lot of our financial documentation. As things continue to come on board, we will continue to post things there as well. I mean, we are in the process of going through our fiscal year 20 audit right now. And so as those things become available, we're going to continue to make those available to the public, because it definitely is. And as Jeremy stated so eloquently, we want to share this information. I have said many times we are a state institution, and we have we're called to share this to make sure that we do that and that we are transparent.
Chelsea, I might also just add for any of those that work in the private sector who are sitting here on October 21st saying, how in the world can they just be getting through the audit of FY20? We actually are subject to the state accounting cycles on this. And because we're audited by the Auditor of Public Accounts, they have to do these audits statewide. And so this is right on track for when we typically go through that process with them. I know that is maddening for folks in the private sector who expect that the books are closed, and within 30 to 60 days, you've worked through that process. Unfortunately, one of the downsides of being a state institution is that, our process takes a little longer, but it's not a process that we control.
Excellent. Thanks for that clarity. And just another item for clarity, because I said I've been reading some message that comes from text, and my phone has never been that popular. So just in terms of getting a flow of some things, if you can submit questions through tribeathletics.com/pathforward. I have one person who is working brilliantly behind the scenes to try to share those questions that are related to the subject matter that we've got. And so if we could just get them funneled through there, we can try to get as many of these as possible. So thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your interest. This is great. This is what we're here for. We want to take this as a collaborative approach, and I love the enthusiasm. So back to Chelsea. One question came in. We've not seen financial model utilized by the athletic department to project revenue from student fees, operations, endowments, and other sources, and expenses including fixed costs, scholarships, coaching fees, and other expenses on a team-by-team basis. Do you plan to share revenue and expense projections and the assumption behind these models? The assumptions might include growth in revenue from ticket sales, student fees, increased return on endowment funds. And then as a follow-up, was the financial model for the athletic department budget presented to the Board of Visitors or some oversight committee to assess the soundness of the plan, the viability of the plan, and the direction of the athletic department?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I'd like to share, our team works actually very, very close with Amy's team every year. Around January, February is when we begin the process to go through and start the budget plan for the next fiscal year. And we have to submit that plan to the university, to Amy's team, to take a look at. And that's how all auxiliary budgets on our campus work. So they're all subject to the same kind of audit process and review process by Amy's team. We do things very similarly, I think, to the way a lot of other people or other institutions do their budgeting process. We look at where our teams are going next year, what those CAA conference schedules look like. We look at how many student athletes we anticipate to have on the rosters next year. We get down to kind of those little minute details to say, in one year, maybe men's soccer has more home games than away games. So they're not going to need as much money in their travel budget as they would maybe in their home games budget. So we're looking kind of at all encompassing things surrounding our teams to make those determinations. We get information from the state that Amy's team shares with us to say whether benefits are going to go up each year, if health insurance is going to go up each year, so that we can use those percentages to kind of predict out exactly what it's going to cost for us. And they're usually very good at also saying, you know, you should assume this percentage of an increase in salary or no percentage of an increase in salary. And so we're able to kind of use those numbers based off of the information we're getting from campus to determine what those things are going to look like for athletics. If we believe that there's an opportunity for us to have a good year from an operating revenue generation standpoint, we may decide to say, hey, we're going to do a 2% or maybe a 3% increase in our operating expenses. And then also we get information from Amy's team about maybe what we think scholarships or grant and aid might look like for next year. So what the cost of in-state and out-of-state might be. And we utilize those projections with our compliance team saying, these are the student athletes that are going to be on aid next year. These are the freshmen that are coming in. These are what their national letters of intent or their grant and aid, what they've signed for. So we put all of those factors kind of into our budget. And we generally do that piece first. And then at the same time, we're looking at the revenue section. So how many home games are we going to have next year? Of those home games, are any against Power 5 institutions in some of our other sports like soccers or baseballs, where we might be able to have premium games where the ticket might be worth a little bit more. And so we make those determinations really to that level of detail, almost on a game by game basis. Are we going to have 6 men's home football games this year, or are we going to have 5 home football games? Because that determines how much revenue we're going to bring in. That determines how much our season ticket can be valued at, and things of that nature. So we really go line by line in every single area. We look at what we've done last year. We look at what we've done in similar years when we've had similar home slates or things like that. And then we make some predictions to say, is this a year where we can ask for an increase from the university side? I can share that we haven't asked for an increase. We did not ask for an increase this year for fiscal year 21 because we knew what type of a situation we're in. We know that we're getting kind of to that ceiling on the student fee. And we also weren't comfortable saying yes to Amy's team. We're going to be able to see that one-to-one increase from generated revenue to back up that increase on the institutional support side. So we actually didn't ask for that increase this year. All of that information gets compiled into spreadsheets that are provided to us by Amy's team so that it's really easy for them to look at as well. They're looking at all of the same thing, which I've really appreciated since she's come on board, that we kind of have a standardized way to provide this information to them. And then we submit it. They look over it, they review it with us, they ask us a ton of questions. I absolutely love working with the people that work with Amy because they're so good at reviewing things, and they always are asking really, really great questions for us to kind of think about why we picked this thing or why we moved in this direction. And then we find out after the board votes on what the expenses or what the grant and aid is going to be for next year, what the fee structure is going to be for next year, then we kind of know and have to go back to say, okay, this is what we asked for, this is what we requested, and make some adjustments. So it's very similar, I would think, to the way a lot of places budget. As they're kind of putting those things together, you really have to go down to that level of detail piece by piece and determine what our expenses are going to be, what are all the factors that kind of go into those expenses, and then along with the revenues, what are all the factors that go into the revenues that we're able to generate. And I'm sure many of us out there know, I mean, COVID had a very big impact. I mean, we're not able to gather on campus together. We're not able to have those events where everyone's going to be able to come and celebrate our teams. And that does affect our operating revenue, that revenue that we can generate. And we knew that was going to be a huge factor for us as we were going into this year. So that's not the shortest answer, but in a nutshell, how we go about the budgeting process each year.
So Mark, it might be helpful for me to just add a little bit about how this gets presented then to the board, because I think that was part of your question too. So, Chelsea.
Board of Visitors.
Yeah, the Board of Visitors, correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, Chelsea worked through, how we handle the internal budget building that then ultimately gets taken to the board. And in essence, for the board, realizing that they're looking at the overall institutional budget, we work with them to give them an understanding of variance from prior years, where there are cost drivers. So, as Chelsea pointed out, in athletics, the big cost drivers are anything that's happening around either mandated or university approved salary increases, fringe benefit changes, which are dictated to us as a public institution by the Commonwealth. And then cost of attendance, because the grant and aid budget for athletics is such a significant portion that if there's a major change in terms of tuition or fees, that absolutely is a driver on cost for athletics. So the discussion, with the board is really a focus on where there are variances either on the revenue side or the expenditure side, and that gets presented to them as part of the auxiliary budget every year.
Just for anybody who's interested, if you go to the William & Mary website, you look at financial documents, there'll be an audited, signed by the governor that will show historical data from a budgetary standpoint for the athletic department. There's other William & Mary comments is there. So thank you both. Jeremy, we hadn't forgotten about you. And a question that came in before Monday's announcement was, will William & Mary actually consider restoring some of or all of the 7 sports teams if long-term financial solutions are reached?
We have now restored 3 of them. And so by the way, I just got a note that I need to talk a little louder. So I'm going to try to talk louder. Normally not a problem for me, but we have now restored 3 of the teams. And so we're happy to do, we were happy to do that and welcome those teams back. And again, look forward to seeing them thrive as Division I programs at William & Mary. And we've talked about 3 frames of the problem repeatedly. And so the notion being that we now believe that we have fairly concretely addressed the need to comply with federal law. And I would just note a momentary distraction that someone who had asked a prior question actually reached out to me. And so I want to reiterate, the reason we did the subsequent review was because there was pending litigation. I don't mean to be flip about that at all. But when we engaged that subsequent review, we saw what we needed to do and acted decisively to do it. But again, now believing that we have a solid understanding and path forward through the equity frame, we turn and look towards the budget stability frame, and that's going to require creative solutions and effort on a lot of people's parts.
Okay, excellent. So the next question, I'll direct to you first, Chelsea, and then I'll have see if Jeremy has anything he'd like to add. So Chelsea, if you can, address, there's been a fair amount of publicity regarding the new track, including estimates of the total cost, which could have been utilized to fund a good portion of the 7 teams. So has an effort been undertaken to review scheduled or planned expenditures between now and the fiscal year end to prioritize spending according to clear and compelling criteria agreed to by the administration, Tribe Club, and or other key stakeholders?
Absolutely. And we actually had what I felt was a really, really great meeting this morning with our entire staff, where we laid out where we are sitting financially for this year. We were one of the, and Amy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we were one of the first groups on campus that when COVID-19 hit, we made some pretty strong financial decisions immediately. We suspended spending. We held back on credit cards for almost everyone in the department except the business office staff, because we still had to be able to operate. So we put some things in place pretty early on to kind of control spending and make sure that we were doing it in the smartest way possible. And those kind of processes that we've put in place still remain today. So we are being very conservative with the things that we're doing because we understand what type of financial situation we're in. To address the track, that project was brought to the attention of the administration, of the athletics administration, actually back in 2015 when I first arrived. It was something that is pretty common to speak to coaches and have them say, hey, I think this is something that we want to keep an eye on. The track is kind of coming to the end of its life cycle. And I think that this is something that we need to examine. And so we were keeping an eye on that particular project, understanding that it was going to be very expensive. Replacing a track is not an inexpensive endeavor to undertake. And so as I was working with Amy's team, and she's got some great people on there, especially that manage capital projects and capital financing, we came up with a couple of ideas and some things that we might be able to do. And her team helped us kind of map all of that out, show us what that would look like over a number of years if we were able to obtain some funding that we would have to pay back to do that project. And so this was something that was finalized in the fall of 2019. And we were discussing it back in the spring of 2019. So these things don't get decided overnight to take on a project of this size. And so we've got a lot of information from the contractor saying that the track really was not in good shape. It was definitely going to become a safety issue. It was a safety issue for not only our student athletes, but any student athletes that we have come to compete at Zabel Stadium. And so we wanted to make sure that we were doing right by our facilities. You know, it's if the roof on your house is starting to leak, you've got to fix it. You can't let that kind of continue to fester and get worse. You have to take care of it. And we in athletics do have a responsibility to take care of our facilities and to make sure that they're up to par. And so we began the project and we obtained the funding for it, and then are in the place that we are right now. And we want to make sure that it's a facility that'll be safe and in good condition for our student athletes.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy, anything to add to that?
You know, Mark, I'm like, budgeting to me, it seems of an exercise in looking at what can we do and when. I mean, those are generally the questions that you face when you're budgeting. And, you know, I mean, I just wonder if you might comment or if you had anything to add on. I mean, we as an institution, so I'm reverting back to Chief of Staff days. I mean, we had a lot of conversations about what capital projects would go forward in this year as an institution. And so you know, and that budgeting question of what can we do and when, particularly around capital projects, I wonder if there's anything you'd add.
I mean, I would just reiterate, you know, this project in particular, when there is a safety issue, when there is an infrastructure issue, you know, I mean, those always rise to the top. And so, you know, Chelsea referred to the conversations that were really occurring back in, you know, early 2019. The question wasn't if this project was going to move forward. It really was, how do we have this project move forward, realizing that you know, there wasn't cash to be able to pay for this up front. So when Chelsea talked about the planning, in essence, we went to the state, asked the state through one of their programs to issue debt, which we did, with the understanding that you know, the institution would cover those costs, that athletics would cover the debt service on those costs over a number of years to pay for that project. And so there's an entire 6-year planning process around capital outlay projects generally, but something like this, when it's an infrastructure or a safety issue, you know, it's not always immediately on the horizon. But as Chelsea said, if the roof suddenly springs a leak, you're going to fix the roof. And so this was one, you know, shortly after I started, where Chelsea came forward and just said, the useful life of the track is really coming to an end. And, you know, although we didn't think we were at a crisis point, knew that we needed to start putting this in place, or we really would face potential concern about the safety of our student athletes or others that were visiting the campus. So it is a very deliberate process, and it also is one that has to be nimble enough that when we see a safety issue, we're able to address it.
Wonderful. Okay, Jeremy, we've received many questions along these lines, so I'll put it this way. Would you be willing to share the data that you used in comparing all 23 varsity sports to determine the 7 sports that were eliminated? We're looking for the specific metrics and how every sport was rated on these metrics.
Yeah, Mark, I do think earlier in the conversation, I sort of laid out what factors are used, and you know, again, if you build a profile of every sport, kind of along those factors of, does it advance gender equity? Does it strengthen our community? And then you can go into some of the financial metrics. And I would just simply say that there's been some remarkable financial analysis done by members of our community. And again, recognize that there are strengths, to every program within our department. But then when you go into those things about, does the sport afford opportunity in a way that bolsters William & Mary's inclusive community and bring people in from a variety of backgrounds and things like that. So I do feel like I laid out what we've used. But again, I just want to acknowledge that if you build a profile of every sport at William & Mary along those lines, there are strengths and weaknesses within every sport. And again, within a comprehensive solution, I know people are frustrated hearing me say this, but like when you make a comprehensive solution to say, what do all of these things do together in terms of advancing those areas? The temptation is to pull out one piece and say, what about this specific thing that we're great at? And I think that's, I don't know that level of precision actually exists. You're looking at profiles for every sport program, how they fit together, and how we build the best, or how we build an optimal sports sponsorship at William & Mary that does those gender equity things, that strengthens our community, that affords opportunity for others, and in ways and in programs that have the capability of generating a significant portion of the revenues, whether through revenues generated from events like games, or whether by alumni and donor interest. But again, I don't mean to be. All of our programs have strengths, and they have incredible people within them. And these are the word wrenching has been used. These are wrenching decisions to do this, but it is what the moment requires of us.
Yeah, just to give a sense, we're almost an hour in, so I really appreciate the details, but we want to try to get as many questions as possible. So Chelsea, I'll come back to you. Would it be possible to look at all the sports and see where changes can be made that spread out the impact across all, rather than just cutting 7 teams? One tribe, one family is a follow-up to that question.
That was definitely an option, Mark. And I think that it was our responsibility to provide a number of different solutions to this particular situation that we were dealing with. But what we considered ultimately was determined that an across the board action was not going to be the best course of action. William & Mary Athletics is already operating with limited funds. We've been able to see that in comparisons to our CAA peers. And we knew we needed to be a bit more strategic with what we were going to do in terms of impacting the overall department. And so ultimately that wasn't the option that was selected, because at that moment, at that time, we felt that was the best course of action to move forward on.
Excellent. So I know this is on the minds of some of the other athletes, parents, and so forth. The question comes in, will the status of all men's and women's sports at William & Mary be reevaluated moving forward, with the possibility of some being cut in addition to or in place of the previous 7? And do you anticipate across the board budget cuts for all sports?
You know, as I shared earlier, we had a really good conversation, I think, with our athletics department this morning to kind of lay out where we are financially. Our department is still facing a budget deficit for this year, and we're in the process of managing that deficit with managing spending, and then hopefully being able to go out and at some point find ways to generate some operating revenue as well, because it's not just going to come from solely making cuts. But there most likely will be additional budget adjustments as we go through the rest of the year and as we plan for FY22 and beyond. And it's really important that we are very good stewards of the resources that we have and how we go about supporting our teams. At this time, there are no plans for any additional cuts to our programs, to any of our teams. But we do know, and we have recognized, that fundraising is going to be a critical component to the successful operating of William & Mary Athletics moving forward.
And Chelsea, we've had a number of questions along this line, so let me try to put it. athletic department staff appears extremely excessive. So why not address cuts and expenses in this area instead of eliminating teams?
So this is something too that I think everybody will be able to get some more information on when they watch the video that Amy and I have put together. So again, really looking forward to that being released. But relative to other programs of our size, and even when comparing us to our other CAA peers, we are relatively on the lowest or the lower end of a lot of our staffing areas. I mean, we support more sports today than any of our CAA peers. And we definitely serve more student athletes. And in looking at some of those critical ratios in the areas of academic support, strength and conditioning, or athletics high performance, and sports medicine. I mean, in academic support, we are the lowest ratio of staff member to student athlete in the CAA. We are the second lowest when looking at strength and conditioning, and we're the fourth lowest when looking at sports medicine. And these are the areas that really impact our student athletes. They have the most interaction with them besides our coaching staff. And so even though I think it can look to the outside as excessive, I think when we really look into the numbers and we look at those comparisons, we need to find ways where we can continue to support our student athletes, especially in those, what we call those high touch areas, those areas that really are with our student athletes and supporting them on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent. Okay, as we wrap up that section before we go to our final one, let me just peek here. I know we have several questions that have been presented to me. This is finances from Deborah. Why were these particular teams chosen to be cut? These teams provide the most bang for the buck. Will other teams be responsible for justifying their existence and also be asked to help cover more of their own costs?
Mark, I'll jump in on that one. And Deborah, I think we've been talking about the totality of factors that go into a decision like this for a university sports sponsorship. And again, I just want to acknowledge that there are programs, particularly within the four men's programs that remain, that do have meaningful efficiencies. And again, when you're in a moment that you're going to make a decision to build from a foundation of equity, and other pieces like that, and consider how do we strengthen community, how do we afford opportunity, things like that. There are also meaningful differences. But so again, I think it is a mistake to simply say, I want to hold up this one factor and say, in a comprehensive decision that looks at the totality of the department of sponsorship, I agree. There are exceptional people, and there have been people who are exceptionally generous around these specific programs. And we're going to move forward in a way that's equitable and in a way that we seek budget stability as we pursue excellence.
Right. And there's ways to support out there through helping out with endowments, as well as, for the annual giving. And that's where the Tribe Club, and Chelsea, thank you for your team for putting up on the website the 7-year history broken down by sports, which are restricted accounts, and then there's some unrestricted. So anybody can go out there and see it, and they can see which sports really do have some good backing. So another question was, when will the college or the university assess whether the new substantial investments in basketball and football have produced a return adequate to justify the elimination of 4 men's sports?
Happy to weigh in on that one. Return on investment requires a known length of time, if that makes sense. And so I would simply say, I think we have exceptional coaches and student athletes in all of our programs, but particularly in those. And, I think we need a longer frame of reference to actually see whether some of these investments pay off. But want to acknowledge that yes, we do have some sports that are more expensive than others and can cost more to operate. And we also have sports that generate more community engagement and involvement around them. But again, I would come back to that point. Every sport program at William & Mary has strengths, and it has weaknesses to what it brings to the totality of the comprehensive sports sponsorship we have at the university.
Okay. And then the last one in this section that I received, it came from a student. and probably Amy or Chelsea can answer, why haven't you shared unaudited numbers sport by sport?
For FY20, is that the question?
Yeah.
I would imagine that if every other year has been audited, this was a question that came in from a student, and just curious, and maybe you could speak to why you wouldn't share that information if you're trying to be transparent.
I don't think it's a question of transparency. It's a question of making sure that what we put out to the public has had eyes on it other than us. I think that that's an important factor to go through and to make sure that what we are providing to everybody is correct.
Right.
And I think if you're going to, it's hard to compare apples to oranges. So if you have a number of audited numbers and then you have an unaudited list, I think that there are too many things that you can't quite compare in the right way. And so the audit typically goes through the months of October and November. We have some things to show in December and January, and as soon as we have them, we will provide them. But I would state that it's not a question of transparency. It's just making sure that what everybody's looking at, that they're looking at the same things.
Right. So I think, just interjecting the questions that I've gotten from a lot of people along these lines is they want that information, they want it as quick as possible. But there's a balance because we want accurate information as well. And that's what the audit's for. So I think the question is great, but we want to be or the athletic department wants to be as transparent as does the university, but they want to make sure the information they're getting out there is accurate. So.
And that's why I focused on the timeline and the process a bit too,
Yes.
So that folks understand this isn't the university trying to drag our feet. This is the process. And we are driven by the calendar that the state puts around the process for us.
Excellent. So we're going to go into our last section here, really focusing on endowments and fundraising. So, I'll start with you, Jeremy. There's been talk over the last few years of funds that donors have provided and designated for specific sports that have been used elsewhere. Is there any truth to this? And if not, how can you be sure? Has an external auditor been utilized?
Yeah, so let me note, again, been here 2 weeks in this particular role, or I've been in this particular role 2 weeks. Welcome the audit that's forthcoming, and want to note that there are multiple levels of audit that goes on in William & Mary Finances. But I've asked our internal auditor specifically to say, I want to see what donor provided funds looks like. And I will tell you that if there are recommendations on ways we can improve, we certainly want to. One of the things that I think we need to offer clarity to is how that happened. Now, there are some programs, without going into great detail, but there are some of our sport programs and swimming and track are examples of them in which there's one account index that's used, but there's great care taken both from the endowment perspective and the transferring of funds to the athletic department, and from the tribe club perspective, the transferring of funds to the department. And so they're independently audited. The athletics department is independently audited. And we're going to bring in an internal auditor to make sure that we give people the confidence that they should have. But there is no intent other than let's find out what we can do as well as we can, and continue to do that. When a donor gives us money, we have a legal obligation to use it in a way that they specified, and that's certainly what we intend to do on a daily basis, and I believe that we are doing it on a daily basis.
And so, Jeremy, I would just say in a typical year, even when there's not internal audit coming in because of a leadership transition, in a typical year, the athletics department of the university is audited by the state auditor of public accounts. The William & Mary Foundation, where some of the funds sit, is audited by their external auditor, independent external auditor. And the Tribe Club is also audited by its external auditor. So in every year, there are at least 3 audit checks on the Department of Athletics. And in this year, with the leadership transition, there'll be a 4th audit check.
And actually,
for those of you counting at home, the number of audits.
And to speak off of that, actually, as those audits find things, then we change our processes as well. In 2019, we worked with the University Foundation to change how we made the requests for those individual checks from that foundation for those endowments. So instead of making one big request with a lot of backup documentation, we had to make individual requests for endowments that were going to each individual sport. And even in this past year, because of COVID, and not a lot of us were, many of us were working from home, they actually then made the deposit for us. So they were able to do that on their side of the house to deposit into those individual accounts. So we didn't even make those deposits in fiscal year 20. So there are definitely processes that we go through. They change as the auditors find things, and we will continue to get better. We look for ways to get better, and we will continue to do that.
Excellent. And Chelsea, maybe when we look at, the teams that are being cut in their endowment funds, I think there's a lot of concern or question about is there any way to make sure that those funds don't go to support, another program, maybe specifically football and basketball?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of our endowments fall into two categories. One, they're restricted for general purposes. Some of them are restricted to go towards the benefit of Olympic sports. So it's a general restriction not given to a particular sport. Those endowments could be redirected to another Olympic sport if we were providing them to one of the sports that is slated for to be cut next year.
Right. So, for example, the football and basketball, men's basketball, are non-Olympic sports.
Correct.
So, if you had a men's swimming endowment, then that money could go to, women's swimming or another Olympic sport if it had that flexibility.
Yes, if they had that flexibility. In other endowments, they're very restricted. So they're restricted right down to this need to be used for this particular sport in this particular area. And with that, the foundation is calling those donors, calling the people that started those endowments or the people that are now managing those endowments to ask them what they would like their restrictions to be. So the donors do have the flexibility to change how those funds could potentially be used. Those donors could determine that they would want to move that money maybe to another Olympic sport, maybe to another women's sport, or to another area on campus. But the University Foundation is reaching out to those donors to find out what their intentions are, what they would like to do, or how they'd like to redirect those funds.
And so, Chelsea, I might just add, I mean, this isn't an issue that's specific to athletics. So, right. So with any endowment, I mean, if there's an endowment established to support an academic program, if there's an endowment for a specific type of scholarship, I worked in previously at a medical school, we would have endowments to help do research around a disease. And at some point, you hope the disease is eradicated. And so the use of those dollars might actually there might not be a purpose any longer for the use of those dollars. And so anytime the institution or foundation determines that it may not be able to meet the obligation of that endowment for whatever reason, there's a process that we go through. Certainly would reach out to donors, make them aware, get input from them. But there's actually a process established through the Code of Virginia and through the requirements around the care and investment of endowment funds that we are obligated to go through if we reach a point where we say we can't fulfill the endowment in the way that it was intended. Certainly our overall objective would be to meet that expectation in any way that we can.
Amy, just for one more clarification, I just want to make sure that people, in describing all that process, the athletic department is not determining the future use of those endowments.
Correct.
I mean, as another check and balance, the foundation does, and donor intent will be followed.
And just another area of clarity, I mean, I did go to William & Mary, so I want people to understand, I know basketball is an Olympic sport in the Olympics, but in terms of definition for what we're doing here at William & Mary, it is not an Olympic sport. So I'm glad we can talk about that. So back on September 3rd, there was to reinstate the Save 7 Sports, it put out a pretty big number, $150 million to endow teams that were basically, focusing on and fully funding scholarships and adhering to that competitive excellence. Is that something that we're still expecting would need to be done if to reinstate these teams?
So I know there's been criticism of the $150 million number. That was extrapolated from what we thought competitive budgets in a national way that was also gender equitable, and looking forward with that. I would simply note by order of magnitude, there was an alumnus who demonstrated a fair amount of acumen that did their own calculations and came up with 92 million. So the only reason I use that by order of magnitude is simply to say someone who thought that they were doing a fair amount of cost reduction, it's still a big number. And so I know people, particularly in pandemic, are looking for something like people want certainty in a time of uncertainty. And so I don't mean to ascribe false precision to the number that went out. We know it's a big number that is beyond anything that we have reason to believe we have capability to raise in the near term. But what the exact precise number of that is to field competitive programs in an equitable way, it's significant, and we believe it to be beyond our immediate fundraising capability.
Excellent. There have been several news articles and editorial pieces lately referring to anywhere from 10 to 13 million endowment that was earmarked for specific sports that have been cut. The insinuation is that the revenue sports will be robbing this endowment. So I have a few questions along this. One, will you confirm or dispel these assertions? I know you've talked about that, but is that going to happen?
Again, and I think we've stated it a couple times tonight, which is important to keep reiterating. Donor intent rules. That is what we are legally obligated to follow, and we fully intend to adhere to donor intent. The donors are going to determine where their money goes, and what those rules surrounding those endowments are going to be. And we will listen to our donors, and we will use their funds in the way that they want us to use them.
And so where do these monies come from? Is this private designated donations or general athletic fundraising?
It could be both. It could be both endowment fundraising or just general athletic fundraising.
Okay, so if it's private donation, was the money earmarked for a particular sport? What happens there?
A lot of times, most private donations do. I know we like to say that the most coveted dollar is the unrestricted endowment dollar. That doesn't happen very often. Most of the time when people are giving to an endowment or giving to private funds, they are restricting the use of that money either to a particular sport or for a particular use. And so again, just making sure that we are using the funding in the way that the donor has intended us to do so.
Okay, so from a fiduciary standpoint, if the money was designated for a sport specific, who is the trustee of the endowment?
So I mean,
yeah.
The endowments sit with the William and Mary Foundation by and large, and they've got a process by which they would evaluate if the donor intent can't be met. They would evaluate that and go through the process, determine if there was an alternative way, from how the dollars were currently being used, if there was an alternative way to meet donor intent. And if they don't think that they can do that, there's a process through the Attorney General's office, the courts, to actually go through and appeal how those funds are used. But it's a very regulated process. And certainly, our intention is to be able to use the funds to the best of our ability, consistent with the donor's wishes. But once that gift has been made, really the foundation or the institution that's the custodian of the endowment has the responsibility to evaluate how those funds are used and to work through a process if there isn't a way to use them in the way that it was originally intended.
Okay. The next question, for the most part, has been covered, so I appreciate it, but I'll state it because it does elaborate a little bit more. What would become of funds currently held in endowments for any of the sports being considered for termination if particularly if there are deceased donors involved. Amy, is that something you could?
Yeah, I mean, again, the donor community is really important to us, and so I know, advancement is in discussions with living donors and family members of deceased donors, and so certainly if and as we were trying to make a determination, there would be conversation there, but we would be soliciting input from those donors in terms of them understanding what the limitations were in terms of what our potential use was, and then what any future use would be. So that's part of the conversation to come if we get to a point where we need to make some of those determinations. But I do think it's important, the donor has given those dollars to the institution or to the foundation, and that entity has the fiduciary responsibility to make sure those funds are used appropriately.
Chelsea, the audited operating statement you posted for 2018 and 2019 shows a cost of about $9 million for academic aid. Does this reflect athletic scholarships or total aid, including need-based aid? Does this reflect total aid or the difference between what non-athletes and athletes pay? They say this is $18,000 per athlete. Swimming scholarships are nowhere near that amount. Please explain this cost. Is it nearly since it is nearly one third of the department's expenses?
What you see in that report is only athletic aid. So that is the money that we give out in athletic scholarships to our student athletes. It does not include need-based aid that comes from other areas of the university, or any other aid that the university may give to some of our athletes. So that's only the athletic scholarship number.
Okay. Amy, this question is centered around student fees. So could you help us understand the composition of the athletic fee posted on wm.edu at $1,001, while the State Council on Higher Education 2020-21 tuition and fee report on page 46 reflects an intercollegiate athletic fee of $2,087?
So the fee posted on the university's website, that $1,001, is the portion of our comprehensive fee that supports athletics per semester. So that's the portion of our comprehensive fee that goes to support the operating budget of athletics. So over the course of an academic year, that's $2,002. Chev looks over the full academic year, not on a per semester basis. And so I think $2,087 is what you said. The difference there between the 2002 and the 87 are actually portions of facility. The university has both a general comprehensive fee and then a facility fee that it charges students. The comprehensive fee supports operating costs for the university and a myriad of those auxiliary programs that we discussed. The facility fee supports debt service for construction and renovation projects. And so the difference in what Chev reports for athletics, they look at both the operating fee, that $2,002, and then the portion of our facility fee that's designated to support athletics facilities. So that's the difference. Exactly the same numbers. They actually do a really comprehensive report across all of the institutions, and we roll up that detail, or we provide them that detail that they roll up into that report.
Excellent. Thanks for providing that clarity, because I know a lot of people are looking at a lot of numbers,
right?
As I have been, and it seems like once you ask the question, there's a reasonable explanation. So thanks for providing that. Jeremy, a question comes in. How does a recent success in raising $1 billion under the Campaign for the Bold speak into our current athletic financial situation? Question, and the person said thanks, and we thank them because they've probably given as part of that $1 billion.
I wholeheartedly agree. The For the Bold campaign simply reinforces how remarkable William and Mary people are. If I recall correctly, and I was listening at the advancement folks are tuned in. That's the largest campaign by an institution of our size, whether medical or engineering school, public institution of our size, all those sorts of things. William and Mary people are exceptional. And they were exceptionally generous. And frankly, we hope to not actually see some of those gifts for many, many years. There's $181 million raised for athletics, but only about 25% of that, $38 million over a 9 or 10 year period, were cash received by the athletic department. There are a number of planned gifts and estate gifts, and they are going to have a tremendous long-term impact. But again, we don't hope to see those gifts fulfilled anytime soon. We're certainly delighted to have those folks with planned gifts, but we want them within our fan base and to enjoy their company. But it does speak to the generosity of William and Mary, and one of the things that Chelsea and Amy are going to note in the separate video that they've done is where donors have directed those funds, which is also impactful in considering the story of William and Mary Athletics.
Okay, excellent. And just because that's in large part why the Tribe Club is there. Again, I would like to speak on behalf of the Tribe Club staff and all the board members currently and in the past, just how much we appreciate the contributions over the years. The Tribe Club is helping on the annual fund. That's kind of like person's budget. That's how you pay your mortgage. That's how you do things like that are critical to stay fiscally sound. The endowment is like retirement funds, and that's also important because it provides some confidence and stability down the road. So collectively, those two are very, very important to the athletic budget. We talked about student fees, but just again, really thank you very much for anybody who's made contributions, because without it, myself and all former athletes really wouldn't have the opportunity that's afforded, which goes beyond much more what happens on the playing field or the hard court or on the pitch for those soccer people or in the swimming pool. I know I left out a sport, but we love it all. And I think if nothing else, this news that's come out, I've always been driven by a philosophy which once was told to me: when you have a problem, you can be bitter about it or better about it. And I think this awareness is so critical, because that is one thing that I hear. I didn't realize finances were that bad. And so hopefully that messaging gets out there that can help everyone feel like if they're in a position that they can give and give back, this is an opportunity. So again, thank you all who have done so and continue to plan to in the future. So Jeremy, as a way of immediately increasing donations to the Tribe Club, why don't you announce that when fans are allowed back into Kaplan Arena, you'll have a Tony Shaver Day celebrating his many years of service to William and Mary, being the coach with the most wins in school history, and being a great ambassador for the university. And I certainly love Dane Fisher here as our new coach, but I have certainly a soft spot for Coach Schaefer and his staff and what they've done.
So one, Mark, let me know to this question. We cannot wait to safely be able to have fans back in Kaplan Arena. And I would only add to that Tony Shaver is among the finest human beings walking the face of the earth. And when I was a graduate assistant in the athletics department, he treated me as if I was a colleague, and has done that ever since. So I hope there is a moment in which we can celebrate his legacy and all that he accomplished here and what he means to our community, even as we cheer on Coach Fisher and the current team that we have. But I think we all hope for a moment like that.
Okay, we're pushing up on the 8:30. We're gonna just do a few more. I know we've gotten tons of questions, and again, we'll try to circle back and respond to these. But in essence, for this one, Jeremy, there are quite a few financial experts in the William & Mary alumni body, and why not put together a task force of these experts and ask them on a volunteer basis to take a fresh look at the financial issues and make some recommendations about possible path forward that will allow all 7 programs to be reinstated?
We have some incredible knowledge within our alumni base, and I would simply note we also have some fantastic people on campus. And there are a number of people here who are in this data every day and are doing that work. And so what I would say is it's been helpful to see. We have had some alumni on a volunteer basis bring forward to us, hey, are you looking at things this way? And that whole piece, and that's benefited us in a tremendous way. We do also know that we have real, I mean, budgeting is not, it's not that hard of a math. I mean, it's how much do you have, where can you put your resources, and those kind of things. And so with great respect for all the alumni that have brought forward creative solutions, and we are engaging with them as we receive them. We also know what our budget situation is. We do have competent professionals on campus who are doing this on a daily basis. So we welcome the input, we engage with the input, and then there are certainly professionals, and Chelsea among them, and obviously Amy and her team, but within our department, who they do this on a daily basis, and they are good at what they do. So we welcome input, but we're confident in the folks that we have doing the jobs too.
Yeah, excellent. And just to dovetail on that, and Jeremy, when you say you've only been in this role for a couple of weeks, I don't know how many Zoom meetings we've done together, but I've lost count because we've been engaging with some brilliant minds, and from these groups that have put professional, pro forum, lots of time, lots of energy, and these aren't just William & Mary alumni. Mike Tramick out in California is a parent, and I mean his amount of energy that's gone in there. I mean it's brilliant, and I think through this process, and it's really an opportunity to brainstorm and learn the valuable resources. Jeremy has stated. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the Tribe Club board. I mean, in the last 2-3 weeks, I mean, we have the executive committee. Catherine Litton has a process on competitive excellence. Robbie McKetta on the financials, and Jess Muskie on the Title IX. And then there were subcommittees, and everybody's engaged. I mean, the competitive excellence group, they broke out and they've communicated with all the coaches at William & Mary, not just the impacted sports, but all the sports coaches. And that's valuable feedback that we are sharing or planning to share back with our interim athletic director. And I will say, just in the Tribe Club board, there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours put forth as volunteers. And we know there are many other great minds out there. So we truly are trying to find a way to get this. So that's where brainstorming comes along.
Mark, I know we're running late. I simply want to add my thanks to the Tribe Club, who has been doing everything, as well as the William & Mary Foundation, and appreciate just the encouragement of those folks and their enthusiasm for William & Mary, as well as their detailed approach. They have been terrific, both the Tribe Club and the William & Mary Foundation, but just appreciate all the effort that they put in and their encouragement.
Yeah, well, thank you. I know how hard you've come in to try to come in hot to this situation and deal with it to the best of your ability, and appreciate that effort. Just maybe the last thing here is just, you've been in this role for a couple of weeks, and you've mentioned William & Mary's history of emerging stronger for adversity. Can you explain what you've seen the past couple of weeks that give you confidence that that will be the case, and how are you working to rebuild that trust?
So one, I don't expect to be given trust coming in. I hope to have the opportunity to earn it. But as far as what I've seen in 2 weeks, last night, I was with our freshman student athletes in the academy, which I used to run as a graduate assistant, and we would be in Andrews or someplace like that, and I would literally be swiping student athletes in. And it was different. It was in a virtual setting, but it was, they were just as incredible as the folks who'd been here before, and just as willing to tease me about my beard and other things like that. I was at Kaplan today, and got to watch a little bit of practice. I've been in the rec center to watch a practice. And when you're at Kaplan, which is really the hub for everything that goes on in William & Mary Athletics, you get to see the field hockey players going down to their practice. You get to see different student athletes coming in as just the hub of the department. Our people are as incredible as they have ever been. They are remarkable young people, and the folks who serve them every day, our coaches and our staff, are so committed to them and to having their experience. And the limited opportunity I've had, and look forward to doing more to engage with our donors. The people of William and Mary are as strong as we've ever been. And this is an incredibly difficult moment, and it remains so as we walk through it on the path that's before us. But William and Mary's people are as strong as they have ever been. They are as great as they've ever been. And time again, they've been the salvation of the institution. And I have every confidence that our people will once again be the reason that William and Mary thrives in the future. And I'm just grateful to be a part of trying to help us push forward in this moment.
Thank you. I've always felt that what draws myself and my wife and our family to William and Mary is the relationships that we have with throughout the university. And you know, it's for times like this that I've gotten to interact more with Amy, and for that I really appreciate you being on the scene here, Chelsea as well, and Jeremy. This really has been a pretty intense several weeks, and I know it will continue. But there is so much more that goes behind the scenes, and I just want to give a shout out to Jeff and Heather and the rest of the people that helped put with this production on here. Without it, we really couldn't do this. And most importantly, to the community for the questions that you put forth. I know we couldn't address all of them. We still encourage you to put them forward. We invite you to do that. Submit the questions to the website. I'll leave that one more time. It's tribeathletics.com/pathforward. Any text, and again, I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but I will forward those as well. We look forward to continuing our partnership, our dialogue, and we value everyone's input. I'll leave you, Jeremy, with the opportunity to close this out this evening.
Mark, I agree with you entirely. The last 2 weeks have revealed how strong teams at William and Mary are. Frankly, both at the university as a whole, and certainly miss those folks in the way that I used to engage with them as chief of staff. But most certainly in athletics as well, and just the coaches and the student athletes and everybody, all the teams that are there are just remarkable, incredible people, and I'm grateful for all of their support. And Mark, I would simply note you have been a remarkable teammate and gone above and beyond what anyone could expect in a volunteer role. And in thanking you for that, I just want to make sure people have noted over your right shoulder, I believe, is an NCAA participant award that's hanging out there. So just want to thank you for that. But to everybody that I'm getting to engage with and encounter in this role, I'm just so grateful for the support, for the passion, the care that you bring for William and Mary. I hope that you'll come back next week on October 28th. We're going to have a continuing conversation and bring forward some more things there. But let me just close with gratitude. The William and Mary's people are as incredible as they've ever been. This is a remarkable place to work. It is a remarkable place to learn and study and just be part of this community. And I want to thank you for that. And I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you all for